You read the title. Today we're gonna be talking all about first ice and some tips that you can use to catch some of your favorite species on early ice this year. So without further ado, let's jump right in.
You'll see here, I drilled a hole, and right here, there's 4 inches of ice. But this ice is in the weeds, and that freezes first, and that's not where we're gonna really need to be. We need to get by the primary break. So what I like to use is a chisel and something with a serrated edge so that when you come back up and you pound it, really digs in. But ice gives you clues, and if you can't read ice, bring a friend or don't go. But when you look in the ice, you'll see stuff frozen in the ice like bubbles, and they naturally come up from the bottom, but the farther down they are in the ice gives you kind of a guess to how thick it is. So as you're going along, sometimes cracks, the width of a crack in the ice is something you can follow for consistency, and things I use when I'm out exploring. And I chisel and drill the whole way to the spot, and then you know you're safe after that. But you got to check it if the weather changes, because lakes will vent, especially on deep bodies of water where there's heat still rising from the bottom. A few tricks to know, and when you go, chisel ahead and then walk up to the spot. Chisel ahead, walk up to the spot. You can see the cracks that have formed from chiseling, and there's still 4 inches of ice. But then as we get out here farther, and ice naturally makes cracking noises, but now the ice has gotten thinner. You can see the cracks don't go down as far. They go down about 2.5 to 3 inches. So it's not time. We're gonna come back later.
Now we couldn't quite get out to fishable water on this particular day. It was actually a few days ago, but we decided that we'd sit down kind of right there on the shoreline and share some good tips for you. Bro's gonna break down a few different species, and he's gonna start with panfish.
One thing that I would recommend to you is to look into the weeds. A lot of basin fish in the North Country where crappies and bluegills will dump down into the basin, but even on lakes where there's basin fish, there's always weed fish. And the weed fish are aggressive, and they're close to shore. And there's always better ice by shore. So consider that when you're targeting them. Green weeds, or just standing weeds, they need cover. Panfish are creatures of edges, and they're gonna hug those edges. There's always bass, northerns, and walleyes hunting for them. And some of my favorite baits here, I wanna show you, are the new tungsten baits at Northland Fishing Tackle, the mud bug and gill getter. The gill getter is really nice because it has a flat bottom. Your graph will pick it up really nice, but it also scoots forward. Adding a waxworm or maggot adds a tail to it, just like a kite, gets it to fly forward a little bit, so you get a forward moving bait. This is a great bait to use in vegetation, and try different sizes, so load up before you go. Here are some of the colors that work really well, but every lake is different. Every lake has a different color to the water, different clarity. So try different colors, like fruit fly, red glow, and ladybug is a good one. Also, if you're going to be targeting fish, maybe on the basin, pick up some mud bugs. What are the differences between them? They both have a 60-degree turned eyelet. Both baits have a hook that points slightly up, which is better for hooking the roof of a panfish's mouth. As panfish bite, they come up, and sometimes you just grab a bait or kill it, then they suck it in, and then they spit it out real quick. This will make sure that you actually hook up on those fish as they're trying to steal your bait. Cool colors like wood tick, has a little brown to it, and you'll notice the eyes. Insects have eyes, and fish do recognize that. The hook is sticky sharp and comes in a lot of different colors, but the gill getter and mudbug in tungsten, the same shape that we grew up using years ago, is back with a little mouth, bulging eyes, and even little nostrils. The detail is just amazing. That's my two go-to baits for panfish, especially. Approach them in the weeds. If you don't find them, then work your way out to the edge. Just practice ice safety as you go, and good luck pan fishing.
Now let's change gears and talk about something that's a little bit bigger and has a lot sharper teeth. Hint.
Just remember that walleyes are still active. Early ice is kind of the mirror image of fall, and in the fall walleyes bulk up and binge on minnows and everything they could find. In early ice, it's the same. They're still biting. It's just getting to the right spot. So primarily, we're set because just fish near shoreline breaks. Shoreline breaks are going to be really good until some heavy cold fronts come in January. They'll start moving off. But shoreline breaks, connected points. And when I say connected points, doesn't mean it's right next to shore. There's connected points on Winnipegosh that go for miles. So follow these areas, but there's some great ambush spots on Red, Lake of the Woods, all the big bodies of water near shore. Steep break near weed beds are fantastic for walleyes. Walleyes are still moving through the weed beds if the weed beds are holding bait. Shoreline connected weed beds and rocks, a steeper break on Red Lake. A steep break is something that goes from 4 feet to 8 feet in 200 feet. That's a steep break on Red. And throw in rocks and you've got everything. But walleyes are aggressive, and even in shallow water, sometimes they'll be off the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4 feet. They come through, and so jigging is really important to have spoons and minnow heads in. I love coffin spoons. They're like a chunk style bait that flutters and has a little kicker tail at the bottom, but I always start out with gold. I don't care where I'm at, because gold is a color for every body of water there is, because gold could be young of the year, perch, could be Cisco's. They all have, in somebody's water, they have kind of a gold tinge to them, but gold pierces through dark water, and in clear water works great also. Gold is a good thing. Red glow is fantastic and kind of reminiscent for the fish of rusty crayfish. Red's just always good, and every lake that has rusties, Lake of the Woods and all these big bodies of water that have that, the fish gorge on them all summer, and they don't forget that color because they got that little red on their side. And then something that kind of came out of the Great Lakes, Wonder Bread, and then purple Wonder Bread. I got to use it last year. I love purple Wonder Bread. It's a great color. 2 foot hop. Check out how aggressive they are, and then when they hit, you know that you're fishing right. But if the fish pass by or they swim without stopping, I look on my AquaView, I could see them swimming through, I'll know. And washing colors, like Fire Tiger is a go-to color. Leech Lake has a lot of young of the year perch in it right now. There's hundreds of yards of young of the year perch floating around out there, so you can't beat perch patterns. Electric perch is another one. If the bite's a little bit slower, or if they're feeding on insects later in winter, I like to use the Brosdahl spoon. If you'll notice how thin that spoon is, you know, walleyes eat bloodworms, walleyes eat mayfly larvae, even dragonfly nymphs, and these are slender insects that come out of the mud. The Brosdahl spoon worked really well as we used it as a prototype. We had one with us one time up at Red Lake, and it caught all the fish. And with a whole pile of pros there in all their tackle boxes, this outfished everything. So the Brosdahl spoon is great. It's got the beady eyes, really cool, and a great hook gap. You could see that the trebles stick out at the bottom. Not just a bait for perch and panfish. Fantastic for those, but a killer for walleyes. Red glow and gold, but looks a little bit different. Slender, beady eyes, and all fish, all walleyes focus on eyes. They got that little silver eye that kind of flickers in the water column. So definitely have some Brosdahl spoons on the side and have at it. But hook on a minnow head, drop it down, give it an aggressive hop. If they're not hitting it, or if they're swimming by without stopping, slow it down and do a slow, steady shake. You just want to shake the bait off at the bottom, just like you're trying to shake the minnow head off the spoon. And if they hit that, then you know you're in the right jigging cadence. Jigging cadence is everything. If you're ripping nonstop, you might get a few fish, but you got to judge by what the walleyes are doing. And I use my AquaView and my Humminbird to see what kind of mood the fish are in. And watch that and adjust your jigging cadence, and you'll be set. Also going to thin line if you can. The thinner the line, the better. You don't need really thick line. Up at Lake of the Woods, I understand you could hook a sturgeon or something great big like that, but the fish have nowhere to go. If you're in the Dakotas and you're fishing in brush, then you need to use heavier line to get them out of there. But fluorocarbon's great line because it has a better sink rate. So tie up a spoon on fluorocarbon with a rod with good backbone so you can set the hook, and don't fish a light rod with a heavy lure. If your rod's bending too much, you got the wrong action.
Next up, Bro is going to cover down on a species that we don't really talk quite enough about.
Pike are in the weed beds closest to the greenest weed beds that you could find in flowages near vast weed beds that face the open lake. If you're in a large body of water, a weed bed that faces the main basin is going to have some really big pike. And why are they there? In the fall, tulipies and whitefish come into the weed beds. So whitefish spawn at cold temperatures. So as there's still some lingering, the pike are going to be there also. And there's also other fish, suckers. Pike key in on these fish. They're soft, they don't have any spines, and so green weed beds. So if you know where there's some nice weed beds, there's going to be pike in there. There's legendary areas in northern Minnesota that have big pike, as well as the Dakotas. Any kind of area that bottlenecks down. Remember, in current areas, the ice is thin, so stay out of those areas. But find weed beds just to the outside, and you're going to have fish. Some of my favorite weed beds top out at 8 feet of water, and they have green cabbage, even milfoil, and the pike will be right in there. Setting tip-ups with quick strike rigs. Northland has some nice quick strike rigs for big pike. Use a sucker minnow, and I recommend when you're putting the sucker minnow down is to pinch the top of the tail off. If they keep triggering your tip-ups and setting them off, if you snip off the top of their tail, the bigger lazy pike can grab them and they're not going to set off your tip-up. But big pike are very active early ice, and it's some of the best time to get them. So get out there, and you could jig them up also. Jigging big pike, it's just a matter of using a bucktail jig. Northland has them in their lake trout selection of lures. Bucktail jigs, add a sucker minnow, and just jig it slow. Or set tip-ups. Tip-ups don't have to be sedentary. You can drill holes and keep moving your tip-ups if they don't get fish. And if one tip-up gets active, move that direction. So actively fishing tip-ups is going to produce a lot of fish. So look to weed beds that are green and the deepest weed beds that you can find. On some bodies of water, weeds will go down to 28. We don't have to go super deep for pike. As long as they're green weed beds that face the open water, and if they're standing vegetation, you're going to catch fish.
Now last but definitely not least, Bro is going to break down one of my absolute favorite species to target on early ice.
You hear about walleyes early ice, you hear about panfish early ice. You don't hear a lot about jumbo perch early ice, and it's some of the best times to get them. You see a lot of people targeting perch after the walleye season closes. They'll go out on big bodies of water and chase them in the basin. But early ice is one of the best times to catch perch. And there are the least amount of perch anglers out there. Perch run shallow early ice on a lot of your big bodies of water that hold perch. In weed beds are the #1 place to find them. So you got a little bit of everything floating around in the weed beds. You got walleyes, you got pike, but the perch are there, and that's why those fish are in there. So shallow weed beds on large basins and large lakes that have jumbo perch, they're going to be there all the way up until we start getting the real cold fronts in January. Kind of ushers them down to the basin, and some lakes they'll drop to the basin right away. There are deeper bodies of water that have jumbo perch in them, but for the most part, find an area where there's a big weed flat where you know the perch could feed, and then head to the basin later. Or if there's a deep hole that comes right up into the weeds, there's going to be perch inside the hole on the cold front days, and then up on top. But I know jumbo perch fishing, for me, one of the best times is when you have safe ice all the way up to the first cold fronts. So get out there and get some perch, and you're going to have a great time. And they're fantastic to eat. They're some of the best eating fish that are in the Midwest waters, and they make great table fare, but they're also an aggressive fish. And catching perch, jigging spoons, they're like little walleyes, but they're really, really fun, and they fight good.
Well, that's about all we got for you in this video. Hopefully you were able to pick up a few pointers on whatever happens to be your favorite species of fish to target. If you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome stuff coming this winter, and we will see you in the next one.